Lovers of knowledge, please come forward and listen. This is a knowledge that is forbidden to be taught in our universities. In fact, it is seen as forbidden knowledge. What is that knowledge? The question is, who are the original or native Australians? That is, who are the aboriginals of Australia? The fact is that the original or native Australians were exterminated and reduced to be strangers in their own homeland. Archaeologically, during the search for the remains of early man by archaeologists, they couldn't find any in Europe and Asia. They found the remains of early man from its evolutionary stage to a complete Homo sapiens sapiens in Ethiopia and Tanzania. Africans were the first humans on earth to populate the world. The first Europeans were very black with melanated qualities. In fact, they were known as the Grimadis. Now, when white Europeans came to Australia for the first time in the year 1606, the natives of Australia were very dark-skinned Africans and Asians who inhabited the land since 50,000 years ago. This was during the period of the Ice Age and the great migration of blacks from Africa to other parts of the earth. After Europeans penetrated Australia to settle among the dark-skinned natives, they disdained and relegated the black natives and saw them as less humans. It became so necessary to exterminate the black race in Australia. European forces slaughtered over 1 million blacks who settled in Australia. Black women who are native to Australia were brutally raped and the body of their children were buried. The European soldiers smashed the heads of these black Australian babies as football game. Black Australian women were stabbed to death in front of their husbands. The tribulation was like a nightmare. It was a brutal massacre where sharp spears were forcefully penetrated into the vagina of black Australian women until they died after bleeding profusely. These invaders went to the bush to hunt down innocent black Australians like animals. The blacks who were caught were gruesomely killed. In worst cases, their eyes were removed, their penis were cut off, and the washed black men cried bitterly till they died. In the 18th century AD, over 100 black native Australians were poisoned to death by white European colonialists. The British carried out the most brutal atrocities in Australia. Even after colonizing the blacks, the British reduced the population of the natives. How did they do it? Now, in the year 1845, the population of black-skinned native Australians was reduced drastically to very few women and children through food poisoning and diseases brought by the Europeans from Europe. The same thing happened in America. In America, around 1492, Christopher Columbus and his group of Europeans exterminated over 100 million natives and indigenous Americans under the watch of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain. After the depopulation of the natives, a relative of Christopher Columbus, who was a Catholic priest named Bartholomew de las Casas, recommended in 1517 that Africans in Africa should be captured as slaves to substitute the exterminated Native Americans. Look at Egypt. The Egyptians of today are not the original Egyptians. Egypt was invaded and conquered. The Hyksos came in the year 1675 BCE. The Greeks came in 332 BCE. The Romans came around 30 BCE, while the Arabs came in December 639 AD, and they conquered and colonized it in 640 AD. This was around the 7th century AD.